Hello and welcome to the Blockade Runner podcast number 251. My name is John. Your name is Ryan. It's a Saturday morning. Technology is not working in our favor today. We're going to fire off a super quick episode talking about Star Wars visions, and we're not going to let our technology woes or our busy schedules get in the way from producing one hell of a kick-ass episode of the Blockade Runner podcast this morning. Ryan, what's up, Ryan?
Nothing. Lightning round. Let's go.
All right, let's go. Hey, let's talk about the writer's strike.
Yep. It's happening.
The writer's strike is happening, yeah. You thought it was important to talk about. I agree, so I'll let you take the lead on this.
Sure. Yeah, I think this strike is something that's kind of a long time coming, but also a culmination of a lot of things that are happening in the media industry and landscape right now. We have this trend within some of these giant media conglomerates to be, so focused on growth metrics that are just impossible, that despite profitability, they are just trying to cut costs in every single way possible. And, we have the consolidation of media companies, and they just keep getting bigger, and they just keep getting more shareholders, and, people at the executive level of these companies are making hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's just not enough for these blood-sucking capitalist leeches. And and then there's things that are being entertained around, like, it would be sure could cut some costs if we just had AI writing these shows, and or polishing scripts, or whatever else these dorks think is going to save them a few bucks and just reduce the human workforce. So yeah, I think it is a very everything is kind of coming to a head right now. Studios were the Writers Guild made some demands. Studios were not willing to budge on them. And, I've kind of oversimplified things from like a biased perspective here, and I recognize that. But this does feel like a lot of things coming together and creating this inevitable clash. And we are going to see the effects of it in all of the media that we plan to consume in the future, and it is going to affect Star Wars. So I felt that it was important to bring up here.
Yeah, I'm biased as well because, I'm a union member. I've been a union member for most of my adult life. And I, just completely support, obviously, the Writers Guild and all of the writers in Hollywood and elsewhere that are on strike. I am not super educated about this, like what's going on this week and all the issues that led up to it. And I wouldn't pretend to kind of, have any expertise on the many issues that are facing this. But, I can just say, like, from the perspective of a teacher, who I luckily have not had to strike, but, we've been close a few times. And, I know that, like, the support of the community is super important. And, unless you work in education, just like any field, unless you work in education, I feel like you don't totally get all the finer details, and you don't know how the sausage is made completely, right? Because you're not there. But there's still a lot of people who are ready to support and have your back. Like when, you as a union and a collective decide, like, hey, these working conditions and, our value it's not lining up, right? Like things are not as they should be. And, I don't think usually anybody wants to strike, right? But it's like a thing that sometimes has to happen. And so, yeah, without knowing a whole lot about it, I would just say, like, I'm completely in support of those writers on strike. I thought it was really cool to see, the support from a lot of people in the Star Wars community, to see support from previous creators who've worked on Star Wars and stuff like that. So, like I think in a situation like this, the support of the community is really important to those who are kind of taking a stand and saying, like, we we refuse to continue to produce. In this case, right? Like, it's a little different in education. We're talking about entertainment, right? We're talking about writers who are working to entertain, and so we as audience members hopefully value them very much in those regards. But they are working to produce entertainment that these massive corporate conglomerates are going to reap the benefits of, and it's only fair that they feel like they are earning their share, being treated fairly, being compensated, because regardless of the outcome of this strike, it's not like the tables are going to turn where the writers are going to be the ones that are making a ton of money off of these films and these TV shows, right? It's still going to be these giant corporations that are making most of the windfall profits. But so yeah, I don't know. I'm rambling, I guess, at this point, but I'm totally in support, and they deserve our support. And I think they have it from us, and I've seen that they have it from a lot of people in the Star Wars community too, which I think is great.
Likewise, yeah. And, if this, drags on and affects the release of upcoming Star Wars projects, that's fine. That's totally fine. We can, we can wait. So.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. Right on. Cool. All right. Well, we will continue to follow this as it develops, but hopefully, the requests that are being made by the Writers Guild are met. And, like I said, I don't think anybody wants to see this go on for a long time, but I don't want to see it end until, the requests that are being made and the injustices, I guess, or whatever you want to say that need to be corrected are corrected. So, hopefully that happens quickly. And yeah, I mean, they have our support. So, all right, let's jump into Star Wars Visions, Ryan. This May 4th, Star Wars Visions dropped. Once again, somebody come in, take away my podcast. Like, I shouldn't have a Star Wars podcast because I haven't seen all these episodes of Star Wars Visions. I bet a lot of people on our timelines and whatnot have watched them all 3 times already or whatever, but I've been super busy. You've probably been super busy.
Yep.
So we're going to talk about the first 3 today, which are all incredible. Yeah, we're going to talk about the first 3.
Which I think is good. I think it's good to kind of break it down like this because, there was, like, technically I could have, like, lost an hour and a half of sleep and just watched all of these, like, straight through in the past couple days. But I really think it is a good thing to just kind of, like, watch one and, like, take it in. Like, really, take the time to kind of, like, think about it and, just, because, like, it's jarring to, like, jump from one to the other. I can't imagine, like, just watching these sequentially and being like, I just consumed an hour and a half of Star Wars. Like, because they are so disparate and, they each have their own kind of things that they're trying to say. And they each have their own styles and stuff. So I think it's actually, like, really nice to, I would watch, like, I've only watched 3. I watched 1 before work, 1 before bed, and then 1 before work the next day. And that felt good. It gave me, like, plenty of time to kind of think and, like, reflect on what I had seen. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I've been enjoying kind of watching them at a slower pace, I mean, I think I probably would have gotten, a lot out of it if I just, like, barreled through them, and I'm sure a lot of people listening did just, like, watch them all on May 4th, because that was a disappointment for you. I was going to ask you how you spent your May 4th, but, like, I once I got home from work, I was not really able to to celebrate May 4th as much as I would have liked to. I did wear a Star Wars shirt to work. A lot of students brought Star Wars up. I'm an advisor for our film club at my high school, so we had our film club meeting after school, and it was all Star Wars, which was cool, with students who are big Star Wars fans and other students who've never seen Star Wars or who are even kind of, like, not into it, like never seen it, but also have zero interest in seeing it. So it's just fun to talk about Star Wars and watch some clips and stuff. Side note, we won't have this conversation now, but I think we've talked about it a little bit on the show before, and it's something that I think is really interesting. There's one student in my film club who has never watched Star Wars, but they're open to it. They just, haven't gotten there yet. And they're like, well, what is the one to start with? Because they said it's so overwhelming. Like, what am I going to do? This is really overwhelming. I can't get into Star Wars. There's so many movies. I don't know what to do. And I said The Force Awakens. My co-advisor was like, Star Wars from 1977. Watch the Star Wars from 1977. I think The Force Awakens, personally.
Wow.
But we could talk about it another time, probably, I guess.
I'm with your co-advisor. A New
What
Hope.
do you say, Star Wars?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I had the experience. I'll make it so fast because we haven't even started talking about Visions yet. But I had the experience of watching A New Hope with a group of 8 or 9 students a year or two ago. I don't think one of them had seen a Star Wars movie before, and another teacher who'd never seen any Star Wars movies before. And we watched the original Star Wars, and we had to do it in like 30-minute chunks or something over multiple days. And it was not until like the third day that any of them were like, all right, yeah, maybe maybe this is cool. You know what I mean? Like, and by the time the movie was over, they were like, yeah, that was better than I thought it was going to be or whatever. But none of them were like, oh, hell yeah, Star Wars, And I think now that movie has a very interesting opening act. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe a not very interesting opening act if you're a brand new audience to it. Well, yeah, but I'm just saying if you're somebody who's like doesn't know much about Star Wars and doesn't know what to think, I'm not sure that's the one to go with, honestly. But we can have a whole other podcast just about this topic, and we can talk about it. So, Star Wars Visions, I love it. I've watched the first 3 also. I'll talk about this as we're discussing the episodes, chapters, whatever they're called. But I would really recommend people, especially if you're going to take a slower approach or whatever, watch one and then watch the behind the scenes sort of filmmaker focus videos about them. Because that's been a really enriching experience for me. I've watched each of them that I've watched. When I got done, I watched the behind the scenes about it before I moved on to the next one, and that's been super cool. So, because otherwise, if you do want to watch those things, it's like you're going to watch these 9 or 10, however many episodes there are, and then go watch like 9 or 10 behind the scenes features. It's like, I mean, that's cool too, but I just feel like it's very digestible, and it's really cool to like watch the thing, sit with it for a few minutes, think about it, and then watch the commentary and the discussion of how it was put together before moving on to the next one. And it's helping me appreciate the different creative voices that are going into making these things even more.
Wow, I didn't even realize there were behind the scenes featurettes.
Yeah, so it is a little they list the episodes by season. So, you go to season 2 and then all the episodes are listed there. And then there's a suggested tab, an extras tab, and a details tab. And the behind the scenes things are in the extras tab.
Wow, I guess I just didn't expect those, so I didn't even look, because that is exactly the approach I would have taken. Had I known, so I can go back and watch them.
They had them for the first season too, but I don't know. It doesn't look like they had them. Or I don't know if they took some down now. That would suck if that's what they did. I don't know, but there's one for Lap and Ocho and one for Akakiri from the first season. And then everything else is from the second season. And I swear there were more for the first season. So I hope they weren't like, well, we can only put so many 10-minute extras in the extras tab. We'll take the other ones away. I hope they didn't do that. But physical media, please release these. All right.
Yes.
Let's talk about the first one. Ryan, the first one is called Sith. Let's discuss Sith, which is gorgeous and really unique and interesting looking from a visual perspective.
Beautiful.
So what do you think about this one?
I like it. I think it's a great way to start. I think it's, of the first 3, I don't know, it's maybe the most simple story. I don't know. Would you agree there?
Well, I think there is, from one perspective, yes, because plot wise, I guess you'd say it's a very simple kind of thing, but it's very abstract also, though. You know what I mean? So in some ways it's the most complicated story because of what is all going on, kind of
Yeah.
sort of there, like symbolically and things like that. But yeah, I mean, from a plot standpoint, like this woman wakes up, does some painting, and then fights a guy, and then gets in a ship and flies away, and that's the story, right? So, and there's only two. Well, there's three characters. There's the woman, the droid companion, and then I guess the main Sith guy that she battles. There were two, I think two companions to that Sith guy also. So I guess there's more than three characters, but three main characters there
Yeah, and very little dialogue.
from them. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Yeah, but yeah, it was gorgeous. I mean, like I think the way that it plays with paint and with color, and with this woman, this apprentice, maybe you could say, who by the end of the episode is a master. The way that she's kind of exploring, two different sides of the Force or of life, existence, or whatever through art and through these different colors, and she's kind of creating this world for herself through this artistic expression. And then when the Sith, who is her master, comes in, he is kind of, like his world is completely different. Like her world is these like white walls with these paintings that she's working on all around, and she's using the Force to kind of manipulate colors and all this stuff. And then he comes in and he's like this very aggressive Force. It's like almost pressing all of that out of her world. So it's really compelling on that level.
Yeah.
And I don't know, one of the other things that's interesting about the experience of watching this episode is that it wasn't clear to me initially that this person, this apprentice, the protagonist of the episode, was a Sith. I mean, I didn't really, think that until much later into the episode. So that was kind of quite the sort of revelation there. And then I guess the takeaway sort of for the episode, as a whole, or for that character as a whole, is that, she's kind of choosing not to pursue that life, right? Like choosing to be something different and not be a Sith. I know that these are sort of canon adjacent or not really, full on canon or whatever, but it's really interesting to see a character who I guess is considered a Sith, but doesn't seem, how do I put this? There's multiple characters we've seen who have been on the precipice, or maybe have recently become Sith, who have fallen to the dark side, you could say, right? And we know that there were all kinds of like positive and light side elements to their persona, to their person, to who they are. But it kind of feels like usually like once they turn and make that change, then that they're consumed by the dark side, right? And we know that people obviously can be redeemed or can return to the light side, but there's usually some agent of change that's doing that. There's some catalyst that pushes them into, returning to the light. Whereas like, it's just interesting to see this character who seems to not really be consumed by the dark side at all, even though they are, I guess, a Sith apprentice. I just wonder, like, what is the backstory there? Did she get tricked into being a Sith apprentice, or like why is it that she seems to be much more balanced than we would expect somebody like that to be?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the key here is balance, where you see it in like very blunt visuals, with the saber, like the blue and the red, kind of happening there, and yeah, I think that's what this is. This is a story about balance, and that you can be, raised in one way, or but like very few people are just like one thing, like full, the like platonic idea of like a Jedi, or like the like a fully evil Sith. And I think, we've been kind of exploring that nuance in Star Wars. I would say it like really kind of came to a head in the prequels, where you have characters like Qui-Gon and even Dooku, who like are like, yeah, they're like in this camp, but like they have, part of them, in Qui-Gon's case, like he's questioning things, or in like Dooku's case, like, he feels like he's doing the right thing, and like that, the organization was flawed and that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Dooku is the character that I sort of would think about the most in as an analog here. But even with Dooku, like Dooku, or maybe I'd think of Kylo Ren and Ben Solo, right? Like I feel like I'm being torn apart. Like there's not balance there, right? Even in Dooku, he's not balanced. So you say like, oh well,
Right.
yeah, but Qui-Gon would never find himself, for years, I'm assuming years, a Sith apprentice. I mean, this person wants out, right? It's clear they want out. I don't think we've seen that really, at least not on screen that I can think of, where a character is trapped in the life of, being a dark side user, etc., whatever you want to say, but like their heart is not there, it doesn't seem like at all. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's just kind of, it's really interesting from that perspective. And I think in the behind the scenes video, the filmmakers are talking about how like towards the end, like there's a great moment in the episode where the paint, like, she's like, it's almost like Rise of Skywalker to a certain extent, like when Rey and Ben are in different locations, you know what I mean? But they're having this battle, like they're in the same location, but like when they cut to the Sith Lord character, whatever, the master, it's all dark and red, and it looks, all, yeah, dark and red. And then when you cut to her, she's surrounded by these white walls and stuff, right? And there's a point where like he like pushes, and it like paints the walls around her this darker color, and then these like orbs or balls of paint, like she like picks up or like uses the Force to like lift up these black ones, right? And then she pushes them back on him. So it's almost like she's using the dark side or something. But she's channeling, I guess, like you said, like nobody's all light or all dark, or like she's kind of channeling that energy. But it's it's she's still rebuking that, like the idea of being a Sith, and she's not, I feel like when Anakin talks about it, or Dooku talks about it, or whoever, they're like kind of enticed by the dark side, and they want to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this is like something different. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, I think, yeah, like when I use the prequels as an example, I meant like that's where like we started to get those kind of like a bit more nuance in the sides, but it was still like pretty clear cut by the end there. But I think that's something that's just kind of continued into like this Disney era. It's really well exemplified with Ben Solo in the sequel trilogy.
Yeah, and I don't mean this as a criticism or a critique or anything of these stories, but I think the medium of a short film lends itself to telling stories with these sort of broad strokes, like we don't have to, it's not the intention, the purpose, or the job of a short film like this to really get into the details of her backstory and how she got there and what she may have struggled with or didn't struggle with, or what's going to happen to her next or anything like that, right? Like these are these big, broad, mythic stories that are like little, I don't know what the term would be, fables or something, you know what I mean? So versus if you're making, the prequel trilogy or the sequel trilogy, or you're exploring a character like Dooku or Anakin who exist on a much larger scale in terms of the amount of storytelling you're doing. I think it would be tougher maybe to it's easier to kind of tell a broad stroke story in 10 minutes because that's all you have time for, and that's really that's the job of what this kind of film is. So you do this broad sort of thing and it's awesome. I love it. But yeah, it kind of, it's all you can and should do probably as a more kind of broad stroke sort of story with something like this. Yeah. I mean, it's just gorgeous to look at. I'm just kind of like scrubbing through on my iPad as we're talking about it, and there's so many shots that are absolutely beautiful. The studio, Ryan, I meant to ask you if you're like familiar with, because I think you know more for sure about like animation and that kind of thing than I do. You follow this kind of stuff a little more than me. If you knew much about this studio that did this one, I think it's called, I'll have to look it up. Studio
El Guiri?
Yeah, Geary. I think it's a Spanish studio.
Yeah, I mean, I just know some tidbits from StarWars.com. The director was Rodrigo Blas, and he worked on... He's an animation veteran, worked on Ice Age at Blue Sky, and then moved over to Pixar and worked on Finding Nemo, Incredibles, Ratatouille, WALL-E, and then most recently, he partnered with Guillermo del Toro to develop Troll Hunters.
Wow. Okay. Wow. All right. See, I'm glad I asked you because I didn't know any of that.
2021, he created this studio and went independent.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So,
great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, oh man, and the behind the scenes for this is incredible. It's only like 10 minutes long, and there's all these little B-roll shots of them in the studio with like little filming things. Practically is not the right, filming things live action. I don't know what the right way to put it is, but they've got lights set up and they've got like, he's like dropping colors into little vats of water and they're filming it and stuff.
Wow.
And I would just love to see a more in-depth breakdown of how this was made, because they're definitely, doing multiple layers and filming, drawing things, filming things, like I just would love to see how this is all composited and put together from various sources, because it's so striking. And they talk about just, very briefly, it's sort of the process, and it's like really, really interesting and intriguing. So I'd love to know more about that. But anyway, this is incredible. Really great way to start it off. I mean, it was Star Wars Visions, the first one. They kicked it off with a really incredible first episode. I feel like that's the same for this one.
Yeah.
And it leads really well, I think, in terms of ideas into the next one, which is Screecher's Reach, which was made by, oh God, the name, it rhymes. What is the name of the studio for this one?
Cartoon Saloon.
Cartoon Saloon, in Ireland. And
man, it's so Irish.
The short is so Irish, absolutely.
I love it.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
There's something amazing about the sort of like the, I don't know, just taking that part of the world, those myths, those stories, that iconography, the caves, the mountains, like the forest, all that kind of stuff, almost medieval kind of imagery, fantasy sort of stuff, and bringing that into Star Wars in this way is like really, really cool. But also looking at the behind the scenes video, I'm like, I want to go there. I want to go to Cartoon Saloon, or I just want to go to the city or the town in Ireland where it's made, because it's unbelievable. It's gorgeous. You got to watch that behind the scenes and just see like the city they live in and where their studio is. It's like, oh my God, it's beautiful. So
yeah, I think one thing I do want to mention now, as this is kind of getting brought up, like because I just the Irish accents in this were so like, whoa, this is super Irish. It was just very noticeable. And I do, so something I do think is, the first Star Wars Visions was focused on Japanese animation studios. It was all Japanese animation studios, and so there were dubbed versions of all of them, but then like you could also just watch them in the original Japanese, which is what I did. And with this, and for either of those options, whether you're doing subs or dubs, there, like you're getting kind of like a uniform experience in the voice acting. Like obviously there's different voice actors, and you know, all of the voice acting across the board was incredible in Star Wars Visions, but you're getting them from either like Japanese or like you know, Lucasfilm animation voice actors. So, but here, what I really love, you know, just through these first three shorts in Visions 2, is that you're getting Star Wars from these like different regions, and like that dialect is intact, and so you're you know, we talk about like wanting and getting Star Wars from like different voices. Like this is the literal of that. You're getting these different voices, you know, regional dialects. You know, it's everything has been in English so far, but yeah, it's like the dialects is just like very cool to get that.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, with the first one, Sith, the director, I believe it was the director, was talking about casting the two main voice actors, and wanting to cast someone who could sound the same, or I think basically said that they could do the recording in both English and Spanish, so that it would be the same voice actor in both languages.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, I mean, obviously, like they're going to do dubs for other languages for this stuff. Right. I would assume, you know, although I don't know how that works when you watch, you know, Disney Plus if you live in Norway or, you know, I don't know.
I mean,
but,
typically
you know,
Disney has a wealth of dubs and subtitles.
Yeah.
For literally everything on there, there's a lot of options.
Gotcha. All right, cool. Let's talk about Screecher's Reach, which was really, really great. I just initially, just the character designs, like the aesthetic or the art style of like just depicting the actual faces and the characters. I was like, I don't know if I'm totally into it or not, but by the end I loved it. The end I loved it.
It's just different. Yeah. Like that's the thing. Like you're going from these like very different art styles because and yeah, like I mean, there's things that like, you know, I would say like there's like things where like instantly I'm like, I love that, like just from like a single screen grab, or like something where I'm like, I'm not so sure about that, but then you know, oftentimes like, oh okay, like now that I've seen it like in motion and like, you know, throughout, like it works. Yeah,
totally. And the character, well, the main character for sure, but all of them really, I just felt like they were so well characterized visually speaking. And obviously a huge part of that is the voice acting and the scripting and all that too. But just, you know, by the end, I just felt like they were so expressive, and like I really understood their emotions and their perspectives and all that, and felt attached to them. And I just thought it really worked in terms of storytelling, you know? So, and yeah, I mean, it just totally won me over. And it was just the character kind of like faces was the only thing that I was not really sure about, because everything else I thought, like the environments and everything was beautiful. But I was like, I don't know if I really like the way they're choosing, you know, just the style of how they're, you know, depicting these characters' faces basically. But like I said, like I was so attached to them by the time it was over. I don't know how I could really critique it at this point, because it just completely, you know, won me over, especially the main character. And the thing about this story, right? So, and I learned this from watching the behind the scenes featurette, but I forget what they call them, workhouses or something like that. But this is like all very inspired by Irish history, or the Irish landscape or Irish culture or whatever, like the whole thing, which is so, I mean, another reason that the Star Wars Visions project is so incredible, because like these creators are bringing their own unique kind of voices and perspectives and telling their own personal stories, through Star Wars. But they were saying that they were, trying to put the like these work houses or whatever they were called, where all these kids were, kind of stuck. That was like just Star Warsifying a real thing from Irish history. If Dave was here, I'm sure he could tell us all the details about this from Irish history. We don't know it unless you do. Yeah. I don't know.
No, I don't.
Yeah, so that was really cool. And then, the director was talking about how certain parts of the landscape in the episode or in the short were like straight from when he was on vacation when he was on holiday in I forget where, but somewhere in Ireland, so it's just like, yeah, really cool, like how much, and I think they were saying that their whole studio is really like they really draw from like Irish mythology and fables and storytelling and that kind of thing, mythology. So it was really cool to see how that's all translated into this short, Screecher's Reach.
Yeah. And I think from like the way I mean, that's all, that's super interesting, and that is definitely part of the the themes of this short. I think for me, without that knowledge, like the way I kind of interpreted this is like kind of like an inverse of the Luke Rey story, where it's someone who is kind of stuck in a place, stuck in a situation, but wants better things, wants a better life, and is destined for a different life. There's some like just really excellent dialogue. I think like early on is like immediately I was like pretty hooked when there was like the conversation about there are worse lives that you can have, and then the main character responds like there are better lives, and I thought that was excellent. And
it's primal Star Wars. It's primal Star Wars, and then the other character is like, yeah, but who's going to look after these ones if I leave? You know what I mean? Like that sense of obligation to the place you come from and the people in your life versus the pull to, the call to adventure, or the pull just to sort of maximize your potential and push yourself to become whatever it is you potentially could become, right? That is like that's core Star Wars right there.
It is.
So
yep.
Yeah.
There's some hero's journey in there, or in this case villain's journey, but yeah, it's so like quintessentially Star Wars.
Yeah. And then she goes into that cave, and it's pretty terrifying, and it feels very, like, again, like it's so of that part of the world, and so of that part of the world's mythology, you know what I mean? The witch in the cave, like it just felt so visually it was incredible. They talked about a little bit in the behind the scenes how they used a different animation process to create that witch, or whatever you want to call it, in the cave, and how it kind of was really it's so intense and so effective, the look of that whole thing. But I was really struck by the fact that this is like this clearly very pure-hearted or kind-hearted character who is feeling like there's more that I can achieve, there's more that I can do, like I need to escape this place, whatever, but just completely being seduced and pulled in by this manipulative dark side, the Sith, and so like when that monster is revealed to just kind of be this old woman trapped under a rock, you know, and this pure-hearted person like uses that lightsaber to, I mean, I think the implication is that she kills that old woman, obviously,
Yeah.
right? And is then like pulled away by this Sith. It's just like, wow, that's it's incredible to, because I felt so attached to the character and felt like she was so good, and it's just like heartbreaking to see her, you know, get away from this oppressive life that she's stuck in, but only to be pulled into, you know, the dark side.
Yeah. Let's talk about that cave for a bit. You know, we here on the show are always big fans of when Star Wars does horror. And I think this is some of the best Star Wars horror ever. It's like the, you know, just the darkness, the the screaming. The screaming is just so terrifying that you know, it felt super effective for me in this case.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. It was very, very intense, very scary, and yeah, I think I'm a big fan of when Star Wars does fantasy also, which is like all the time. But like that's you know, lightsabers and the Force, and you know, the cave on Dagobah, and you know,
Yep.
like the fantasy stuff is some of my favorite parts of Star Wars. That was something we were talking about in our film club meeting the other day too. Well, I don't really like sci-fi. I was like, oh man, Star Wars is not sci-fi though. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, sometimes it is a little bit, but like that's really not. That's not what I would, you know, primarily describe it as, and that's not what I'm drawn to in it. And I think
Yeah.
because it is a mix of a lot of different genres, you know, the Western and the fantasy and sci-fi and other things, like it's just like, you know, there is something there for most people, and you know, yeah, this one leaning heavily into the fantasy side of things is a big part of what pulled me into. And you know, the cave is, I mean, that's on a symbolic level, just on a visual level, it's yeah, it's incredible.
There's great conversation around the cave too, because you know, one of the characters is like, this is a really bad place. And then, you know, our main character says, some bad places are here to test us. And
Okay.
that's you know, that's very much the cave on Dagobah. And you know, the hole in Last Jedi. But yeah, I think I don't know where I was going with this, but I think it is like, you, I don't know, like you're when you're watching this for the first time, like it's hard to kind of, you're not really sure, like, oh, is this just going to be like a Dagobah situation where this character like confronts their fears, or like you know, Last Jedi situation where this character confronts this like doubt, or you know, whatever. But like, this is actually the character being kind of manipulated by the dark side here. There's like this amulet that is kind of guiding them, and then we find out that it is you know, the Sith character that does show up at the end. But yeah, I don't know, like, but when you don't have all that information, it is you know, you're not really sure which way this is going to go. And then, you know, there's just this like terrifying like Blair Witch happening in this cave, and you know, the character confronts them, and like, you know, that character is kind of like they win like a fight, and then you're like, okay, that character, the witch isn't a threat anymore. Like this is a good thing. And then you get to the point where the main character picks up the lightsaber and kills them, and you're like, oh, well, I guess this is the route that we're going here. And there is like that very noticeable change, and then they come out, and they're a different person when they leave that cave.
Yeah, absolutely. The witch was never a threat, in fact, unless you go into her home and whatever, right? So, yeah. Did you know that the Sith at the end there is Angelica Houston, voiced by Angelica Houston?
I did not.
Yeah.
Wow.
If you were like, am I watching the Royal Tenenbaums all of a sudden or something? That's why. Yeah. I recognized her voice right away, and then I was like, I'm like, but it's not, right? It couldn't be. And I checked the credits, and it is. There's a name you'll know in the voice credits for the 4th episode either, but I won't tell you who it is since you haven't watched it yet.
Okay.
All right, Ryan, I don't have a lot of time left, so let's talk quickly about In the Stars, which is about 2 sisters who are the last of their kind fighting for survival when Imperial forces discover them. This is quintessential Star Wars as well. The Empire has come in. They have abused and misused the resources of this planet. They have wiped out the population of this planet, and it seems like there are just 2 sisters left who have survived. Their mother was a Force user. Their mother was very brave and took on the Empire, but she, along with the rest of the planet's population, did not survive that battle. And so we have these 2 sisters who are struggling to survive. One who's more pragmatic and is like, let's just sneak in, get clean water when we can, and just eke out our existence here. And the other who says, no, we can face them. We can destroy the Empire. We can finish the job that our mother started. And so it's super inspiring on that level. And the whole time I'm watching it, I'm just thinking like, okay, but this little girl who like keeps reaching out her hand toward the Force, like, and nothing happens. Like, she can't actually take on this massive, Imperial, kind of factory or whatever. But again, it's so quintessentially Star Wars. It's a natural element that defeats the technological, through the Force, through the bond between these 2 family members, and also through just water washing away this technological, terror of the Empire there. So all that was super inspiring. And then also I love too that there's this thread, kind of between this one and the first one of artistic expression being, one kind of power or I guess like one way of using the Force. And I thought it was really beautiful and inspiring how, she painted, through the Force, this, kind of tribute to her mother and the citizens of that planet on that rock wall too. So just so much incredible stuff in this episode.
Yeah. Initially, this was one that the art style wasn't my favorite. I think just the style of animation is just not typically like my preferred style of animation. But like you said, but the last one, by the end, it won me over because of strong characterization and strong direction. And I think what I really loved about this episode is, basically what you were saying. I think this episode did a really good job talking or showing the environmental impact of the Empire, and how common people will fight for. I guess they're uncommon, but non-Empire people will fight for the survival of their people, their home worlds, their land. So it is, kind of like what I've never seen the movies, but it's kind of what I think Avatar is about. but it's like a way of telling that story in 15 minutes as opposed to 17 hours.
I was just going to say a 17-minute version of Avatar after sitting through the 3.5-hour version or whatever sounds kind of primo, to be honest with you.
But yeah, this is the true way of water, because that water wipes out that Imperial installation here.
Yeah.
And in the process kind of restores the water of this area. So
yeah, I just thought it was so hopeful and uplifting, and the conclusion being like, you know what it reminded me of to a certain extent, Ryan. This is maybe a little bit of a stretch, but it reminded me kind of the opening of Breath of the Wild, I feel like, or maybe Wind Waker too, where you have a story being told like on a tapestry or whatever, but it's sort of being drawn in front of you. And like, so as she was painting on that rock wall, it kind of was like that. But just like at the end, seeing like the clouds part, and it's like, oh, now the stars can see us again or whatever. Like we can see Mother, we see her up there. And then like watching that star kind of rise up from between that rock wall, those two parts of that rock wall or whatever, and lift up, and the other stars start to, and then it kind of like the short ended on that star sort of twinkling up there in the sky. I mean, it's so, it's very like straightforward. But also I just thought it was like beautiful, I don't know. I loved it.
Yeah. Very Ghibli-esque as well. Just like a real, using fantasy, science fiction, whatever, to tell a story about people and about nature. And the relationship and, modern progression and industrial growth.
Yeah, and I loved, the first chapter or whatever, Sith, which is more abstract, and kind of, definitely requires some more interpretation of the symbolism and the imagery. But I also loved like how this one was just like very straightforward, and like what you see is what you get. And in the beginning, when the little girl walked up to the wall and started painting the story on there or whatever, I was like, oh, this might be a little abstract too or whatever. But by the end, I was like, this one's very, very straightforward and just very hopeful and uplifting. So, yeah.
Phenomenal.
And obviously visually, completely different than the other two as well. You know what I mean? Yeah. So this is like claymation, I guess you'd say, or not claymation, but
it's like kind of like
stop motion
CG, kind of thing.
Yeah. I wonder. Yeah, would love to know more about how this was put together, because then the next one is a similar style. We're not talking about it because you haven't watched it yet, and also I got to go. But the next one is like of the Wallace and Gromit style, right? I think it's from people involved with Wallace and Gromit. It has a Wallace and Gromit kind of feel. So, but it's also very, very, very Star Wars. Very, very Star Wars. So
nice.
I'll just tell you that before you watch it. Yeah. So. Cool. All right. Well, we have to wrap the show up there, Ryan. I am looking forward to watching more Visions and discussing more Visions in probably our next episode. So until then, you can find all of our previous episodes, posts, etc. at blockaderunnerpodcast.com. If you want to tell us what you thought about Visions, favorite episodes, etc., or just reach out to the show about any topic, you can email the show, blockaderunnerpodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Almost forgot the email address for a second there. blockaderunnerpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow the show on Twitter at Blockade Run. You can follow Ryan on Twitter at
Vayamalay, VAYAMALAY, and Standard Definition Gaming, DefStan 480. And on May the 4th, I posted a bunch of old Star Wars games clips on there, and that was super fun. Love doing that. Absolutely. I think I went a whole episode without mentioning it, but we have our Discord up and running as well. So if you want to pop in there, we're having great Star Wars discussions all the time, and we would love for you to join us there. So until next time, thanks very much for listening, and we'll be back soon with another episode of the Blockade Runner podcast.